This is part of the DuBois series about how to plan for a divorce. I know that sounds kind of crazy that people don't necessarily always plan for a divorce, but there's usually 2 or 3 ways that a divorce starts. One is you get served with divorce papers that your husband has filed against you, and that's scary and disorienting and awful, and we're going to talk about that in a different session. And then the other way is that you're the one who says that you want to get a divorce, and you're the one who's going to be a little bit more in the driver's seat, and you're going to be in control of when it happens and how it happens. And then another way is that you both sit down together and you mutually decide it's time for a divorce, and that's usually the most amicable way that this can happen, and it may stay amicable and it may not. But this particular session is about you've decided that you're ready to move into the divorce process, and you're going to be a little bit in control of how it's going to happen. So I'm going to start the same way that I always do by saying that I can't give you legal advice because I don't know anything about your situation. I don't necessarily know the laws in your state. But this is an educational series, and I'm a divorce lawyer. My name's Amanda DuBois. I've been practicing for a long time, and what we're doing in this series is we're doing what actually they teach lawyers to do when we're getting ready for the bar exam, and it's called issue spotting. So I can't tell you exactly what the laws are in your state, but I can tell you broadly what the issues that you need to think about are when you're heading into the divorce process. And this session is going to be more specific, and we're going to walk through the specific things that you really need to think about, and you're going to have to do some of your own research in your own state. There are websites in most states that you can go to. There's a state website probably for people who are called pro se, and that's spelled P-R-O, new word S-E, and those are people that are representing themselves in their divorce. So even if you're not going to be pro se, you can still make use of the pro se divorce websites in your state, and they should be websites that are generated by your state or your county, not by some website that you don't know who these people are. So you might want to look in the pro se portion of your state website or your county and get as much information as you can there. And there's other ways. You can also look at your state statutes. Every state has a body of laws called statutes, and they're called different things in different states. Sometimes they're called revised code, and sometimes they're called the code, and sometimes they're called statutes. But at any rate, in most states, divorce law is all driven by state statutes. And you can find out what are the statutes in your state, and there's going to be things in there that are going to explain to you the things that the court would ultimately look at when they're trying to figure out how to divide your assets and how to come up with a parenting or child custody plan for your children. So for children in divorce, you have to have some kind of a child custody plan. And if you don't have any children, then you at least need to separate your assets and your debts. And like I said, you need to find the statutes in your state by looking online to try to figure out kind of how it works in your state. But all of them are going to have sort of the same important factors and issues, and we're going to do some issue spotting now for people who are going to start their own divorce process. So, let's divide it into finances and parenting to start with. And we talked about whether or not you need a lawyer and what kind of lawyer you want to hire, and there's a whole session on that. But if you do have a lawyer, the most important thing is that you be as organized as you possibly can. You use the planner that we're going to provide for you, the DuBois. It's going to be a way for you to put together a framework, and in the beginning of your planner, you're going to have your divorce team that we've talked about, which are your friends and family members and spiritual advisors, therapists, lawyers, anybody who's going to help you be the person that you want to be in this divorce. And we did that in the vision section. And then you're going to have the first couple pages going to have your vision, which is basically how you want to approach this divorce and what kind of person you're going to be in the divorce and what are your highest values that you want to have represent you in the divorce. And when you're in a divorce, as emotional as it is and as scary as it is, you have got to be a businesswoman. I know it sounds like, uh-oh, but you really do. You have got to figure out where you are financially, because you now are in a situation where you've got to plan for your future. And you're going to have to be taking care of yourself probably in the future, unless you live in a state where it's easy to get alimony or spousal maintenance, and if you have a situation where you're entitled to a big fat alimony or spousal maintenance package. But not everybody is, and more states are taking the position that, if you're young and capable, or youngish, or even middle-aged and capable, you can get alimony, but it's not going to last you forever, and so you really need to start thinking about how you're going to take care of yourself. in the future financially. So as part of planning for the divorce process, you need to start thinking for the future about what you're going to do financially. And the first thing you have to do is figure out where you are now. And so, kind of scary sometimes, not everybody really wants to face their current financial situation, but that's what you got to do, and you got to do it now. So, first of all, you're going to find your bank records. You're going to find out where you have bank accounts. You're going to find out where your husband has bank accounts. And sometimes, although not very often, there are bank accounts that you don't know about. So you're going to start searching around the house, because now you haven't said you want a divorce yet. So you've got the really big advantage of being in the house with all of your financial records, probably, like in the den or the file cabinet or wherever you guys keep stuff. So this is the time when maybe your husband's at work or on a business trip, or out with his friends or at a soccer match or something. You got to get into those file cabinets and you got to find everything. You got to find out where your banks are. You've got to know exactly what accounts you've got. It's helpful if you can get the past 6 months of bank records. If you can't get the bank records, at least know where the accounts are, so that if you end up going to a lawyer, the lawyer will be able to either ask the other side for the copies of the records or actually send a subpoena and get copies of the records. Because once the divorce process starts, you have the full backing of the court system, who can issue subpoenas, or your lawyer can issue subpoenas, to gather all the information that your husband may or may not want to be providing to you. But it's really hard for your lawyer, or for you for that matter, to do that if you don't know where the stuff is. So number one is find out where you have bank accounts. Find out where there are retirement accounts. Remember, if you or your husband have worked in different places, you might have different little small retirement accounts. Maybe you worked someplace 10 years ago and you had a little IRA there and you forgot about it, or maybe your husband worked someplace 10 or 15 years ago and he has a 401k or an IRA. So you've got to gather all of them, because it's really important to know exactly what all you've got. So you've got bank records, you've got retirement records. You might have a stock or investment portfolio like at Merrill Lynch or Fidelity or Charles Schwab or E-Trade, one of those type of accounts. You might not know where they all are, but if you start rifling through the file cabinets, you might be really surprised at some of the stuff you find. You might have life insurance that has value, because sometimes life insurance policies, you pay a certain amount of money and then the policy actually has some value. So you might have life insurance. You might have a house, and if you have a house, you need to figure out how much your house is worth, and you need to figure out how much you owe on your house. So probably in the file cabinets you'll find copies of a mortgage statement. You need to know who owns the mortgage on your house, or who holds it, if it's Countrywide or Chase, or what bank has it. So even if you don't know the amount that's owed, we can find that out if we know who holds the mortgage. And then some people have a home equity line of credit, and your lawyer's going to call that a HELOC, H-E-L-O-C, home equity line of credit. You might have a HELOC on your house. So some people, maybe their house is worth $350,000, and maybe their mortgage is $150,000, and then they have a HELOC for another $50,000. So there's really $200,000 owing on their house, not $150,000. So at some point you're going to have your house appraised by an appraiser, or you're going to decide to sell your house, and then the real estate agent is going to tell you what it's worth. So some people, now you might have, most people have a car, and you might owe money on your car, or you might not. You got to find out. And then you got to find out what your car is worth. And the way that you do that is there's something called Kelley Blue Book, and you can go online and you can say, I have a 2004 Honda Civic, and it'll tell you what your car is worth. And then you got to figure out if you owe any money on that car. And then you have to figure out, if your husband has a car, what's his car worth, and do you owe any money on that car? So you can see where we're heading here. You might have a boat or an RV, whatever kind of stuff you guys have. You want to get that all down on a list and know really what it's worth. What you don't really need to do right now is try to put a value on all the furniture in your house, because most courts aren't going to say the couch is worth $1,000 and the chair is worth $300. But if you guys have a collection of something, like stamp collection, I suppose, or anything that might have some value, put that on your list. In some cases, it's not altogether uncommon for there to be households where the husband is really controlling and he doesn't let any financial records come in the house. Well, guess what? That is a huge red flag that you probably have bank accounts or investment accounts or something out there that you don't know about. And that's when you got to kind of be a sleuth and look in his briefcase or see whatever you can do. But if you are in one of the situations where you say, well, my husband handles the finances and he keeps it all in his office, you may or may not be able to figure out where the money is. Ultimately, it will all come out in the divorce. It's just going to cost you a lot more money because you're going to get a lawyer who's going to have to send subpoenas, and it's going to have to go through the legal discovery process, which we're going to do a whole session on. But in the planning stage, it's a big red flag if there are no financial records in your house.